ready. Please tell.
Jason Ruff.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
If you could please be seated, state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Jason Ruff. That is Jason. Last name Ruff.
How are you employed?
I work for the Wisconsin Department of Justice at the Division of Criminal Investigation.
What is your job title?
I'm a senior digital forensic investigator.
What does a digital forensic investigator do?
So what we do is when sworn officers, special agents for the Division of Criminal Investigation seize electronics, they are brought to our office and we conduct examinations of pretty much all the ones and zeros that are flowing through all of the systems. So like phones, servers, computers, anything like that, we recover that data and kind of see the types of activity that were on it in a scientific manner.
Do you have any special kind of training that qualifies you to examine forensic data from electronic devices?
I do. I have a master's in cybersecurity with a focus in computer forensics. I have another master's from John Jay College in criminology. I have gone to a large number of trainings through the National Computer Forensic Institute with the Secret Service. I have several trainings with the National White Collar Crime Institute, and just kind of a litany of different certifications, specifically with the IASIS, which I can't specifically remember off the top of my head what IASIS stands for, but it's the International Computer Investigators something.
And so what is it that you predominantly spend your time doing?
So primarily I am behind a screen looking at data that has been acquired from just different devices that have been seized related to criminal investigations.
Were you asked to examine, do forensic examinations related to 2 devices recovered during the course of the investigation into this case?
I was.
And was one of those items Maxwell Anderson's Samsung Galaxy S22 phone?
It was.
Can you tell me, do you examine the phone itself or are you examining something else?
So in this case, because I came on a little bit later, I examined what's called the extraction of the device, or the forensic image of the device, which is acquired by another examiner and then was given to me to look at.
A forensic image is essentially what?
So it is, there's different versions of it. Forensic image would be a bit-for-bit copy of the actual data that's on the device. Now, what makes this somewhat more difficult with cell phones is because cell phones have all those applications that we have on there, which has lots of encrypted proprietary data that most of those companies wouldn't necessarily want myself or anybody else knowing how they fully create those things. So what we get is what's called a full file system extraction. And a full file system extraction is pretty much all the data that you can possibly get from a phone within the file structure of the actual device itself.
And were you also asked to examine the forensic image or extraction from a different item?
Yes, I was.
What was the second item?
So the second item was an actual forensic image of a computer hard drive.
Did you prepare a report related to what you found after conducting those examinations?
I did.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 495.
Thanks.
Is that your report?
This is.
Move 495 in.
Any objection?
No.
Received.
Now, I want to start going through Exhibit 495 first by, let's just go through it front to back here, okay?
Sure.
So what do we have? What did you do?
So the first part is me describing the tools that I used, which I can list off. The tools were because like in anything you need tools to conduct your examinations. I used X-Ways Forensics, Magnet Axiom, Celebrate, A-Leap, Notepad++, DB Browser for SQLite.
So much of this is narrative that you typed yourself, but a lot of what we're going to see is stuff you put into the report directly off of the Samsung device, correct?
Correct.
And these things I've highlighted here, I think they're what you just listed off, right?
Yes.
All of those are just programs you use?
Yeah, so the different forensic tools for just different things that need to be done for either recovering certain data or analyzing certain data.
All right, and then you had found a text conversation between the phone. Well, what was the phone number for this phone, by the way?
So the phone number for this phone
I
would
have
have
it
been,
highlighted on
yeah, it would have been 262-416-4874.
And you looked at the conversation between this phone and Sade Robinson's phone?
Yes.
Did you ascertain whether any phone calls had ever been made between Maxwell Anderson's phone and Sade Robinson's phone?
I could not find any phone calls.
So from what you looked at, it appeared they only communicated through these text messages.
Actually, he's leading the witness.
I'll rephrase it. Did you find any other communications beyond text messages
I did not.
between those two phones? Sorry.
I did not, no.
All right, and as we go ahead here, this is the phone conversation.
Yes.
The last text message is sent at what time?
So the very last text message between those two phone numbers is sent at 10:36 and 16 seconds in the morning a.m.
So in these timestamps, these are going to be in real time?
Well, yeah, they're going to be in Central Daylight Standard Time.
Okay, thank you. Did you go on to see whether the device interacted with Sade Robinson's Instagram account?
So I wouldn't be able to say whether or not it was the actual Instagram account, but it interacted with something on Instagram that cached images that appeared to be of Sade.
Tell us what a cached image is.
So a cached image, the best way that I was kind of taught it is when you think of surfing the web, what you're actually doing is actually downloading the web to your device. And part of the reason that happens is just for the purposes of allowing your device to potentially reload things that you frequent. Just because something's cached doesn't necessarily mean it's a frequently viewed thing. However, when you, for example, scroll through Instagram, as you're scrolling through Instagram, it creates thumbnail or representative images on your phone within that application. so that if you scroll past those again, it will load faster. And those are cache images.
So your phone's essentially remembering the images it's seeing.
Correct.
I'm going to go down. I think this is going to be going on to page 5 here. Were there cached images of Sade?
Yes, correct.
And to clarify, there can be cached images that were taken by the device itself, right?
Yes, yeah.
So like if you took a photo with your phone would also cache that?
Correct, for various different reasons.
All right, so it's not, my point is it's not just web surfing or social media browsing.
No,
Your phone is doing that throughout whatever apps.
correct.
Okay. What do we have here on page 5 on the screen? I have it up next to you.
So there were a total of 10 images that I found from this time period that were cached. These are just 2 representative images from the application Instagram of someone that appears to be Sade.
And when you say this time period, what are you talking about?
So it would be the timestamps that the cache images were, which I believe was, here I'd have to look.
What time stamps were images of Sade cached?
7:33 p.m.
On what date?
This would be the 1st of April. My apologies.
On the screen now, are those 2 of those images?
Correct.
All right, let's move ahead to 10:07 p.m. What starts happening on the phone at 10 o'clock?
So from 10:07, 10:09, 10:12, 10:22, and 10:57 p.m. on the 1st, I start seeing usage of the camera. So everything on your phone is a different application. So basically, you see the application that's built into the Samsung pull up the camera application.
How is it that you're able to see all this again?
Because with any interaction with your phone, if you kind of think of like either Domino's or Rube Goldberg or something like that, just because, for example, you are just clicking on a photo, for example, and it pulls up, there are a litany of different things that are happening behind the scenes. So, and I think it's further in the report, you'll see that things are being stopped and started so that different system resources can get access to those applications.
So you were able to tell that in the 10 o'clock hour, it looks like on 5 occasions, the camera on the phone was activated?
Correct.
Would that require user interaction with the phone, human
would.
interaction?
Yeah, it would.
What about after that?
After that, there is somewhat of a lull in usage, and then until the next morning, I would say.
All right. What did you notice occurring on the phone at around 12:05 a.m.?
So at 12:05 a.m., a user unlocks the phone, and the phone's display turns on and goes to the last activity that would have been happening on the phone, which in this case was usage of the gallery. So like if you scroll into your phone, your gallery, just your images.
At 12:05?
Correct.
Is that what I have on the screen here, or am I in the wrong spot?
Yes,
Okay. And specifically 12:05 and 37 seconds a.m.?
correct.
And what gallery specifically are you talking about? Just be,
So this would just be the regular Samsung gallery. So if you click in it to look at all the photos you've taken.
photo gallery.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then what's happening after 12:05?
So after that, and this is kind of where I get into that whole Domino's or Rube Goldberg as you press on things, the user transitions to the camera application, which pauses the actual gallery application because they're technically 2 different applications, even though they're kind of morphed together, which then subsequently stops usage of the gallery itself.
And how often does that occur starting at 12:05?
I would have to look specifically, but I believe 3 occasions.
All right, well, let's just keep going. So at 12:05 and 38 seconds, what happens?
So at 12:05 and 38 seconds, the camera is launched, which is then launched with a third application, the launcher, which launches and pauses things, which then causes the phone itself to stop the gallery application.
What happens next?
Then after the gallery application stops, several seconds later, the camera pauses because it goes back to, or not seconds, milliseconds later, the camera goes back, or the camera pauses and goes back to the gallery application.
And does that interaction then stop?
Yes, and then a second later, about, the camera application stops.
After that,
After that, the gallery application is once again paused.
and by 12:05, 5:42, what's going on?
5:42, oh, I think I skipped ahead. I see that there is some interaction with a cache image. I can't determine what that interaction exactly is.
Okay.
So there's a modified date to that. So there's some sort of interaction with the photo.
Then what happens next?
Then the gallery application is paused.
And what continues to happen until 12:08?
So until 12:08, this kind of sequence of events happens until there is, like, it goes from camera back to gallery, and then there is a period in between there when the pattern of usage appears that the bunch of images are deleted.
Tell us about that. What time does that happen?
So the deletion period begins at approximately 12:05 and 53 seconds. It starts, there's an interaction with about 32 cache images.
Is that what I'm highlighting here on the screen?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, the interaction with those images, it could have been more or less of those images. Those are just the images that the cache was left over from after that period. Shortly after that interaction, there is the delete services of the phone begin. So it starts deleting, and then a millisecond or so after they hit delete, there's a notification interruption. And that notification is simply the phone saying, "Are you sure you want to delete these images?"
Okay, so I just want to break that down a little bit because that was a lot, and a lot of lingo too. At 12:05 and 53 seconds, there are 32 images that you identified as having a modified timestamp. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know what modified means is happening to those images?
Yes, so there's interaction with those images.
Human interaction?
Yes, human interaction.
This is not the device
No,
doing
this is
itself
not
on
the
its own?
device. Yeah.
Okay. And are you able to tell what happens with the human interaction to those images?
Based on the time frame and when the phone itself actually has in the actual timeline itself, the next actions that happen within that system is deletion.
Of those images that were deleted,
It is highly likely that it was of those images.
okay. And included in those images, were there images purported to be of Sade Robinson?
Correct.
And I'm going to scroll down. Are these those images?
Yes.
This last one was modified, correct? For
Correct, yeah.
purposes of presentation?
Yes.
All right. Are you aware, for that particular Samsung phone, what a person practically would have to do to delete those photos?
So yes, I did actually a lot of tests with this with an actual Samsung S22, so I could verify what I'm talking about. They would have to go into their gallery, essentially select all of the images, and then hit delete, and then that notification pops up and says, "Are you sure?" Essentially, "Are you sure that you want to delete these images?" You hit yes, and then they're gone.
And is that what happened here?
Yes.
What happens next? I think I have up here, is this the delete service?
Yeah, so like I said, phones are just a bunch of applications. So there's an application for deleting those applications within the actual gallery application occurs. It stops shortly, several seconds later, and then it eventually is started again several seconds after that.
What started again?
The deletion is started shortly after it stops again.
Was there more images, were there more images deleted?
It is more than likely that more images or videos were deleted at that time.
Okay. Were you able to see which images?
I was not.
But in the prior instance, you could see the 32.
Yes, correct.
What happens after 12:06?
After 12:06, you mean 12:06 and 35 seconds?
Sure, why don't you just keep taking us
okay.
through it?
12:06 and 35 seconds, there's that notification interruption. Then shortly after that notification, the delete service is stopped again. And then again, several seconds later, the delete service is started again. Notification happens at 12:06, several milliseconds after that. And then the service is stopped. And then the gallery, which is where the delete services are happening in, is then paused and the camera is launched again.
What time is that at?
So the camera is launched at 12:06 and 56 seconds.
Does that necessarily mean the camera's being used to take photos? Or?
Not necessarily, I mean, could have accidentally hit the camera application.
After that camera is launched, what happens?
After that, almost simultaneously, obviously the gallery is paused, and then shortly after that, the camera is paused and a user goes into the phone settings.
Okay, what happens once the user goes into the phone settings?
So the user is in the settings for about 20 seconds or so, maybe a little bit longer.
Beginning at what time?
Beginning at 12:07, well, beginning at 12:07, they're in the actual settings application. The first configuration change within the settings is at 12:07 and 23 seconds. And then again at 12:07 and 25 seconds.
And what's happening there?
So essentially, a user is changing some form of network settings. Unfortunately, because of how some of this stuff is recorded, I can't tell what exactly those settings are specifically with network. Certain network settings will only tell you what the last state of the settings were. So if you turn on or switch Wi-Fi or any of those types of things, it's gonna record the last state that it's in from the time that it was downloaded.
By network, you're referring to like the cellular network that's servicing the phone?
Yeah, either cellular network, Wi-Fi, any of those things, Bluetooth.
What happens shortly after 12:07 and 25 seconds?
So shortly after that, there is a notification from the operating system that pops up. I don't know again what that notification was, but
A phone notification?
yeah,
Not something the user's doing?
no, not something the user's doing.
And then what time is that at?
That is at 12:08 and 38 seconds.
All right, now this is beginning after 12:08 and 38 seconds. What are you seeing?
I do not see any user interaction or human user interaction.
Human user interaction. When is the last time that you see human user interaction with that Samsung phone?
So the last time that I can determine that there is any human user interaction for sure is at 12:07 and 25 seconds. There's possible human interaction for that 12:08 time period that caused that notification, but it's also likely possible that there was some other system thing that popped up because of it.
Okay, so let's just assume for the sake of argument, it's the latter one, the 12:08 one.
Correct.
Do you see any human user interaction on the phone for the rest of that night for hours?
No,
That's the last time?
that is the last time.
Until when?
Until the next, not the next morning, several hours later at 8:59 a.m.
on April 2nd.
on April 2nd.
So from 12:08 a.m. to 8:59 a.m., are you saying that there was no human user manipulation of the phone?
Yes, there was absolutely no human user interaction.
What happens, and I have on the screen here, is this is you documenting that?
Correct.
Okay. So in sum, can you just, and I think it's up on the screen here, but just summarize briefly what exactly we're seeing occur between 12:05 and 12:08 on the phone?
So a user is going between the applications and the camera back and forth several times. Then they begin deleting things, and then there are some form of configuration changes in the settings, and the phone is not interacted with
After 12:08?
after 12:08.
And in there, we know that the camera was used.
Correct.
Okay, and so you know that there was camera usage from that phone after 9:20 p.m.?
Yes.
What happens after that? I know you said there's no user interaction, but as you go
Yes.
forward, you saw some things?
Yes, so at 12:17, so approximately 10 minutes or so, maybe a little bit less than that, later, the phone registers itself as being inactive, so the screen goes into an inactive mode, essentially like a somewhat, I guess, you could parallel it to like it goes into sleep mode. The screen still stays on, but the phone is in a sleep mode, which then pauses the last application that was open, which was the settings.
So that's not a user doing anything?
No, that's the exact opposite.
Okay. After that,
So then settings are stopped almost simultaneously from that period of time.
are you able to conclude that between 12:45 a.m. on April 2nd and 8:43 a.m. on April 2nd, there's no user interaction with that phone?
I can 100% conclude that.
There's some notifications that come in, though, overnight, right?
Correct.
Tell us about that.
So when you have social media, there's different types of timestamps and everything when it comes to digital media. There are the timestamps that are recorded from when you are interacting with your devices that are changing those timestamps. And then, for example, when you're talking about social media, email, really anything network related, there are also timestamps from, say, the other person who maybe posted it or sent you that email. Those timestamps are going to be from likely when the actual email or post was created, and that is registered to whatever server is hosting whatever application that is. That created timestamp doesn't mean that somebody's actually interacting with that on that specific device. It's just the time at which that was registered to outside servers.
There were some of those overnight after 12:08?
Correct.
Okay. I have one on the screen here, 12:09, or excuse me, 12:49. There was some kind of social media notification.
Correct.
And then 12:59.
Correct.
Okay. What starts happening at 1:21 a.m.?
So at 1:21 a.m., the phone screen officially turns off. And then shortly after this, there is a notification that comes in, and it's about 2 or 3 minutes after that, there's what's called edge lighting, which I don't know if any of you have Samsungs, but essentially the idea is that when you get a notification, the outside edge of the phone lights up to let you know there's a notification even though the screen is off. And then 4 seconds after that, it lights up again just to remind you that the notification is there.
All right. Then what happens?
And then the phone begins to power off.
Describe what happens to the phone.
So the phone had a low battery state, and the phone essentially dies. So as a phone is dying, essentially the phone starts moving different things and energy towards more important aspects of of what the phone actually is meant to use for. So for example, if you're out in the woods and your phone is dying, the last thing that's going to probably turn itself off before dying is going to be your ability to call for help. So certain applications, so the screen turning it off, it was going into a low state, and then the phone kind of starts checking itself to make sure that is there really not power, or is there something else going on with this phone? Doesn't mean it's not going to turn itself off, but that's essentially what happens. So this artifact, essentially I don't know if he's got that up. Oh, so the Samsung Wellbeing gives you the ability to kind of look at your own phone usage. So it starts recording that the phone is powering off, and then there's an internal application that usually doesn't necessarily parse out with a lot of forensic tools called the ERR.P, which I guess the name is, I guess, irrelevant, but what it is it records different powering events on the phone. It records, for example, when the phone is factory reset or first set up. It records when a human user turns off the phone. It records when there is a shutdown and power up related to a system. So like when you're updating the operating system of your phone, it frequently has to turn itself off, and then it registers when the phone dies. In this case, it registered that the phone died due to lack of power.
And at what time did the phone die due to having no power?
At approximately 1:35 and 57 seconds.
Is that what I have highlighted here?
Correct.
Okay. And below that, it would be the artifact that you're talking about?
Correct.
That is not the same as someone physically turning the phone off, right?
No. So if the phone is physically turned off, this artifact registers it as an unrequested because it's essentially monitoring the system itself. So if the system requests that something be turned off, then it'll be recording why it was turned off. If a human user interacts with it, it is listed as unrequested.
And were you able to identify the next time that the phone was connected to a power source or had power?
Yes, so the phone at about 8:59 in the morning.
8:59 a.m. on April 2nd?
Correct.
And what did you see?
So the phone registers that there is no power, and it goes into a low power mode, likely due to a phone being plugged into a charger.
And then how about when the phone turns on?
The phone officially turns on at around 9:20 in the morning.
All right, and throughout the night, there were other notifications, right? But the phone was off?
Correct.
And when you're seeing those notifications in the phone, are you seeing, obviously, the time they would have then received or gotten to the phone, or what?
No, we are seeing the time that those were created.
All right, so I have one up here, for example, at 2:09:32, the phone would have been dead, right?
Correct.
But nevertheless, you're seeing this Facebook notification that I have highlighted here.
Yes, so that would be the created time of that post on the news feed.
The created time on Facebook, and it has nothing to do with the phone.
No, that's relevant to Facebook.
All right. Throughout the night, there was an email from Uber, correct?
Correct.
What time was that email sent to?
So the email was sent and recorded on the email servers, so Gmail in this case, at 3:51 and 17 seconds.
And from Uber?
From Uber.
And where was the Uber ride?
So the Uber ride was from the previous night, and I will have to scroll past because I did the entire thing. The Uber ride was to 1200 West Canal Street.
Is that the Twisted Fisherman?
Correct.
So this email was just a bill, the receipt for the Uber ride,
Correct.
sent at what time?
I'd have to go back. At 3:51 and 17 seconds.
Were there images? I'm sorry, there were a number of other social media notifications that you could see, correct?
Yeah, throughout the early morning, there's a bunch of Facebook notifications or Facebook newsfeed.
But again, the phone's off at that time? Okay. Did you notice what time there appeared to be user interaction with the phone again?
At 8:59 in the morning.
And sometime prior to that, obviously it gets connected to the power source. What time does it turn back on?
It turns back on at approximately 9:20 in the morning.
So the first human interaction you're discussing, that's the,
So, yeah, so between 9:19 and 9:20. So there's settings on your phone that when your phone dies or you turn it off, they're literally called persistent settings. These settings are so that all the settings you have on your phone, you don't have to go through your phone and reconfigure your phone. So these settings are some of the first ones to activate themselves upon your phone reactivating, and that reset of these settings occurs at approximately 9:19 and 54 seconds.
so the phone's back on by 9:20 a.m.
Correct.
after having been off since 1:35?
Correct.
Okay. Throughout the date of April 2nd, did you notice there were other interactions between this phone and images of Sade Robinson?
I did.
Tell us about that.
So on the 2nd, at 4:10 p.m. and 4:24 p.m., there were several cached images from from Instagram of what appears to be Sade. And then, yeah.
How about April 3rd?
Again, on April 3rd, are 2 photos cached of looking at the Instagram images or interaction with.
All right, let's move on to the computer tower. What did you notice on the computer tower beginning in that similar time frame shortly after midnight?
So shortly after midnight, there's a user on Netflix, and at approximately 12:07 and 38 seconds, they search within Netflix Love Death, which brings them to the Netflix show Love, Death, and Robots.
Whose computer is this again?
I was told me to be Maxwell Anderson.
Okay. So the computer goes to Netflix at 12:07 and puts on a show, Love, Death, and Robots?
Correct.
And then tell us what you're able to see about what happens with Netflix and what you were able to determine is specific user interaction and when that stops.
Sure. So from that period of time, the first show is queued up, and that is an episode called 3 Robots Exit Strategy. After this, the user several seconds later transitions to another episode called Bad Traveling. The show begins to play several seconds after that.
What time is this at?
That is at 12:07 and 50 seconds.
Okay, then what?
Then shortly after that show ends, the next episode begins to autoplay. This would be the episode, The Very Pulse of the Machine.
At what time?
That is at 12:08 12:08 and 16 seconds.
Okay. That was not user interaction, that was Netflix auto playing?
Yes.
Okay, then what?
Then around a dozen minutes after that episode begins, its credits transfer to the Night of the Mini Dead, which plays. It's just under 7 minutes. Again, I tested using the same browser and everything to check the properties of how Netflix worked at that time, and approximately when there is the time when Netflix starts to autoplay the next episode is when that episode starts to transition and beginning, which would be this Night of the Mini Dead.
Okay, and what time is that happening at?
And that is happening at 12:23 in the morning. And
Is that what I have on the screen here highlighted?
yes, that is correct.
So when's before 12:23, when is the previous last human interaction with Netflix?
Before 12:23 would be around that 12:07.
So from 12:07 to 12:23, Netflix is just playing on the computer, and then at 12:23, is there human interaction at 12:23 or no?
At 12:23, shortly thereafter, well, no, not at 12:23. Shortly after that, there is user interaction about 5 minutes after that.
At what time?
At 12:28 and 11 minutes.
And he puts on an episode of what?
An episode of Three Body Problem, which is a suggested show under Love, Death, and Robots.
And does the episode play?
So it sits on there, but the user transitions to that and then begins to play the first episode.
What time?
So it begins to play at 12:33.
So and then how long is that episode?
That episode's about an hour, I believe.
Is there any user interaction with the Netflix throughout the night after that time?
No,
With the computer tower at all?
no,
So just to recap for the computer, there's user interaction with Netflix at 12:07 a.m.
correct.
That stops. Then shortly after 12:23, there's an additional user interaction at 12:28?
Correct.
And then after 12:28, is there any other user interaction?
No,
Any user interaction with the computer tower whatsoever between 12:45 a.m. and 8:43 a.m.?
no,
There's stuff going on in the background of the computer, though?
correct.
Can you summarize that?
Yes. So, there's a lot of system activity with a computer that's tied to the internet. So just to name a few, there are what appear to be logins, but these logins are system only. So when you aren't using your computer, the computer is doing maintenance of itself. So it's logging in and out. There's different security IDs. So one of the ones that I have down here listed is it's a Windows event log 4625. And it's a type 5 service, which is again operating system only, not human interaction. What ties further is the Wi-Fi lease is up. So essentially at about, what time was that? About 2:35 a.m. in the morning, the internal IP address for the computer itself's Wi-Fi lease expires. So what this essentially means is there's different types of networks. You have your internal network, then you have your external network, internet, and all of that stuff. In the internal network, in all networks, there's a finite amount of IP addresses. So what your router does is it cycles through these things, and your router has basically this dynamic host inside of it that reassigns things IP addresses. And the reason you need an IP address is it's essentially, if you think of your house or your apartment, it's that number on there so that the traffic knows where to go. So at about 2:35 in the morning, the lease expires. It appears that this the router for this was only set up to have about an hour period, which is fairly short, which causes interruptions with like streaming and things like that, which would be the reason why Netflix stops at that exact time because it can't reach out to Netflix because it doesn't have an IP address for a millisecond or two to pull the next episode.
So when the episode is started at 12:28 a.m., well, first of all, are you aware if Netflix will just continue to play the next episode?
Yeah, Netflix plays 3 episodes on average, unless you change the settings, but it will auto play 3 episodes and then do the whole "Are you still there?" kind of thing.
Is that what was happening here?
Correct.
Okay. No further user interaction with the computer after 12:28.
Correct.
Just a couple clarifications. I actually want to touch on one thing. When we looked at those, when we looked at some of those cached images from the phone, a lot of those have it's like a created date that says January 1st, 1970.
Correct.
Can you tell the jury what that's about?
So in computing, computers obviously don't understand time, so they need a time frame from which to start. So there's different things that in computing is called epochs. So they pick a specific time in history that creates essentially a calculation from how far from that date we are currently now. So when there are no actual dates, it will revert back to that epoch time. So, and off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you which type of epoch it is, but I believe it's potentially the Unix epoch time of 1/1/1970, which essentially means there's no date.
It's just kind of a default.
It's a default, correct.
I have no other questions.
I think we'd like to start after lunch if we could.
I think that's fair. It's 10 minutes to noon, so we will take a break at this point. Remember the admonitions. Remember, no communication between each other about this case, no discussion with family or friends, no posting, no emailing, no texting about anything to do with this trial. Wear your juror badges prominently. Don't do any investigation. Put it completely out of your mind till you come back this afternoon. This afternoon, we can kick up at 1:30?
1:30, Judge.
1:30. So we'll have the door open before that. Hopefully you'll all be back on time so that we can get started right at 1:30. Okay, thanks everybody. Just leave your notebooks on your seat.